Of incredible upheaval, our household finances may have taken a hit as well, or perhaps you ended up saving more money than you thought. Bottom line is, a lot of things have changed. What does it mean for the future of money? Part of our Future of series. Let's bring in Melissa Leong. She is a personal finance expert and the author of Happy Go Money. Melissa, great to see you again. Probably an understatement to say that this has been a year of upheaval, and clearly it has financial repercussions. What are you seeing out there?
I think that there are a lot of surveys that show that Canadians are more stressed about money among a litany of other stresses. You've got your health stress, your market stress, the work from home worries. I am legitimately afraid right now that my two kids will burst in here while I am on live television. And so all of this anxiety and stress leads to reduced brain function. It actually leads to irrational money decisions. And so some people may have been finding themselves in this pandemic behaving in ways that are out of character. I know I have. So for example, anxiety creates a present bias. And so that means you are focusing on the now versus the future. It reduces your ability to process complex information. And you need to be able to process complex information to make smart financial decisions. So for example, that might take the form of not being able to process the long-term repercussions of deferring your debt payments, for example, when you don't need to, or maybe taking your money out of retirement savings to be able to hoard some cash right now because you're fearful of the market. And so retail therapy is another big one. People have been spending to relieve stress, to gain a sense of control, perhaps some normalcy during this time. I have been emotionally spending as well. And I wrote a book about it, and I still have been falling into that trap.
Yeah, what's been interesting through all this, and the Bay Street economists keep crunching the numbers, and depending on who you talk to, either 150 billion or 200 billion in excess savings. Not savings, but savings above and beyond what you would normally see in normal times. I will admit to being guilty to perhaps not putting some money to work in its most productive way because of the pandemic. I gotta have cash. I mean, longer term, that cash is not working in my favor.
Absolutely. I think a lot of, but you made a really good point. Not all Canadians are in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but some Canadians are faring better than others. And the ones who have savings, the ones who are spending, for example, consumer spending is on par with last year. I think that people are cautious, and that caution is taking different forms. So some people are rightly putting their money into things like an emergency fund, building that up for the future, and some other financial priorities. Where that caution is harmful, however, if we look beyond the pandemic, is we are already risk averse, and taking your money out of a stock portfolio, for example, and sticking into some savings accounts or hoarding it in cash is not going to help you in the long run in terms of meeting some of your important financial goals. You're not going to be beating inflation. You're going to be missing out on really important returns in order to be making some of those goals.
And I think you mentioned the fact that Canadians with debt, and we know that we were carrying massive debt loads heading into this, that money sitting in the savings accounts, not getting you anything in interest in this environment. If you have massive amounts of debt, well, you're paying interest rates on that. And if you don't, then you're not putting it to work in the market. So yeah, clearly it's going to be hard heading into 2021, I think, to say, what is my financial plan? What do I need to actually be thinking about heading into that new year?
I think that when we look beyond the pandemic, there's some great evidence that shows that human beings are adaptive. That's great, because you're going to essentially go back to some of your old routines and some of those good money habits that you've adopted right now, you perhaps can carry forward. What you don't want, as you said, is to carry over some of the financial pandemic, for example. You don't want your bad behavior right now to carry forward and to be hurting you in the future. And so, like you said, there are some things that you can be doing right now. One of the very first things is being mindful of the fact that you may be behaving irrationally with money, like me, for example. And so putting into a system in place that will perhaps outsmart you. So, for example, I've heard of a behavioral economist who actually locked himself out of his investment portfolio online on purpose, so that he would not obsessively check and perhaps make some unhelpful portfolio decisions going forward. And so for that might mean seeing your financial advisor and talking to them more regularly about your updated plan, making some short-term and some long-term goals for 2001 and beyond, so that you can clearly see, okay, these are my priorities. Let me look at my spending. Let me look at my behavior. Am I living in a way that is in line with these priorities that I have written down?
Now, we do know as well directly from the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who was on our network a couple weeks ago after the fall fiscal update, Ottawa does have its eye on our excess savings. They are hoping once we get past the worst of the pandemic, we will put it to work. So I guess longer term, what's your feeling about us wanting to spend that money? If we have been sitting on this pile of excess cash, 170 billion, maybe up to 200 billion by the end of the year, it doesn't seem to be an easy anxiety to unwind as we head into the new year.
It's true, but like I said before, a lot of research shows that human beings, we are adaptive. And so there has been some speculation from experts that say that, we might just end up going back and doing some of the things that we did before. We have, that pent up desire to spend money. And once we are more able to do so readily, then we might naturally do that. However, from my point of view, from a personal finance standpoint, I think that it's important for everyone to look at some of the things that they've learned over the pandemic. For example, I think it's been a great experiment in testing people in terms of, well, what is it that you truly value? It's shone a spotlight on what we value, and with a lot of the closures, we've been able to live on much less. And so what is important to you during this time? Can you make a calendar reminder, some of these notes 6 months from now, a year from now, to talk about some of the financial habits that you think are important that you want to carry forward? Can you make some priorities, set some priorities right now and actually put those into place? For example, like an automatic deduction from your checking account into a savings account that will carry forward beyond it, when the pandemic is over. Will you have maintained some of these values that you hold so dear?
Okay, before I let you go, Melissa, you mentioned a few times about how you indulge in retail therapy. What sort of conditions or rules do you build around yourself to make sure the retailers will love the sound of that, considering the strains of the pandemic, but surely you need to rein yourself in to a certain degree.
Well, I think it's being mindful of what is it that you're buying and why are you buying it? So, for example, I think that looking at the last 3 unplanned purchases that you have made, what were you feeling when you did that? What were you buying? And certainly during this time, I have felt that, with Christmas and the holidays here, not being able to see my family, I want to provide my children. This is what I'm telling myself in my head, Greg. I want to provide my children with a beautiful Christmas with great memories. And what I have to remind myself when I want to go and click the one-click buy button on the internet, I have to remind myself that the things that I've learned during this time is what has been most valuable is spending time with my family. And no amount of toys I buy will replace that.
All right. You know what? That's a nice thought heading into the holidays. Melissa, great to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Melissa Leong is a personal finance expert and the author of Happy Go Money.